Welcome to the Refurbishment Mastery podcast with me, Martin Rapley. If you're a property investor who is worried about paying too much for your next property, concerned that you don't know how to manage a refurb, or scared that you will be ripped off by a builder, then this is for you. In this podcast, I share over 30 years of experience of managing refurbishments and conversions to help you make more profit, save your time, and ultimately enjoy the process. On with the podcast. I was asked if I could talk around a topic of successfully navigating your first big renovation, which of course I'm delighted to do. And that is this episode of the podcast. If anyone else has got any topics they'd like me to talk about specifically, then just drop me a line. I'll factor them in and cover them off as soon as I can for you. And this particular message I received also said, could I focus around bridging the gap for beginners who perhaps have done a little bit of buy to let or perhaps are still have only ever bought their own property, and as a result, perhaps with both of those, not really done any kind of renovation to any size before. And this leads me to the question really is, well, what makes a big renovation? And of course, different renovations would be perceived bigger for some people than others. And of course, someone like myself who's been renovating properties in one way or another for very close to 40 years now, a big renovation for me is multi-million pound type projects, whereas a big renovation for some property investors might be £50,000 worth of building work. Maybe others it would be 100, some would be 200,000. So there is no threshold here at all as to where a small renovation becomes a big renovation. Before going any further, if you haven't listened to episode 40 of these podcasts, that would be a really good one to listen back to, because that's the sorry story of two property investors who took on a big renovation way beyond what they really had the capability to do, and way beyond what they actually had the finances to do. And unfortunately, they slipped into a number of holes along the way, shall we say? I won't tell you the end of the story. Listen to episode 40, and you'll get some learnings from that. And that is what happens could happen on a big renovation. And I don't want that to happen for anyone. And that's why I actually told that story. So how do we get to big renovations? In that particular story, that particular episode, the property investors had not done any kind of project before, and they'd leapt straight in to a big project. And the building work element of that project was around about £1 million. So you can see that was the size. That was the first experience they'd ever had. Whereas other property investors and other smaller developers, they start gradually. They start with a small project, and then they go to something that's a little bit bigger, and then they go a bit bigger, and suddenly they find that what started off as a small house refurbishment, then they've gone into perhaps converting a house into an HMO. Then perhaps they've done something bigger with a loft conversion and a rear extension, and got a bigger HMO. And then the next stage up, they've perhaps converted a big house into some flats, and then they've done some commercial to residential. This is gradual growth. And for some people, that's absolutely the best way. Other people want to grow bigger and take on bigger projects that much quicker. And to some extent, it's really, what is your own appetite? What do you really want to do? What's your confidence like? What's your knowledge like? How can you what's right for you ultimately? Some people need confidence even to get started on their first refurbishment, which might not be, for some people, considered that big, that scary, that risky. But for some people, we all see things in a different way. So, but there's a lot of people that would quite happily take quite a big step quite early on to actually get going into bigger projects. And of course, the thing with the bigger projects is that by and large, we ought to expect bigger value add as a result of our refurbishments and renovations, conversions. The bigger the project, in theory, the more value, the more profit. But of course, the bigger the project, the more risks there are there. And so I'm going to give you some things to just think about, irrespective of where you are really. And just to say that for those of you that are listening that need some confidence to get started, well, you're in exactly the right place. That's why I've put these podcasts together. That's really been my business model, probably now for near 9-10 years or so, is to give property investors and small developers the confidence to get started, and give the background that they need to know to actually get their projects off the ground and become successful investors or developers. Ultimately, a lot of what I talk about is not rocket science. We're not in that at that level at all. But there are a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of nuances. There's a lot of terminology within construction. There's a lot of different people that could be involved in construction. And really, what this podcast is all about, and indeed, anything you see me doing on social media, any articles you see me writing in magazines, is really about getting some basic knowledge and information out there to help encourage people and give them the confidence to actually get started in the first place. So, what is the key thing? What are the key things to having a successful larger project? Well, in reality, these are my four key elements that I actually discuss in podcast number 3. So if you haven't heard podcast 3, go back and listen to that one. But in reality, those elements apply irrespective of the size of the project you're doing, and they apply even more the bigger the project goes. So on a small project, if you don't put a lot of effort into them, but you'll pretty much come out of it and you'll be okay. Whereas as the projects get bigger, you want to be spending more time and effort on these 4 key elements to ensure that you don't end up having a disaster like the other podcast that I was talking about earlier on. So on a small project, if you get some of these 4 elements wrong, it might cost you a little bit of money, and you might have to hold the property a little bit longer. I know people that were planning on selling a property and they've actually held it and rented it out for a while to let the figures sort themselves out. It might be a little bit longer before you can refinance, or you leave a little bit much money in the deal. On these smaller projects, that probably isn't too serious. It's not life-changing. As the projects get bigger, you do have the risk is that some of these things go wrong and then it becomes a cascade. And as I say, episode 40 is the one where unfortunately there were a number of these things that had gone wrong for those particular developers, and it tumbled down around them. So let me go through the 4 elements just as an overview to help sow the seeds as to what we need to consider on any project, but more so on a larger project. So the first element is understanding the project itself. What are we actually trying to deliver with this project? Who is going to buy this property from us at the end? Who is going to live in this property at the end? Who is our guests if we're doing serviced accommodation? What do those people actually expect? What do we need to deliver to satisfy that market? And ultimately, other things like, is there a demand for that market? Your estate agent may tell you that this would be a brilliant property to refurbish and rent out, but you need to be doing your own research, your own due diligence into everything you're being told. And as part of all of that, you need to put together a detailed budget for the delivery of this project. And as I say, if you start a small project and you haven't really got a budget, or the budget's a little bit woolly, oh, I think I can refurbish this for £20,000. If it costs you £25,000, it's probably not too serious. But if you're taking on board a larger project where the budgets are measured in hundreds of thousands of pounds, then if you get that wrong by 10, 15, 20%, you can see immediately that that is significant money. So the budget at this stage is super important, but the research into your end user, what they need, how you're going to deliver that, and of course, in knowing what they need, that helps you put the budget together as well. It helps you work out how you take the property in its current state and get it to a point where it's right for your end user. That all gets factored into the budget as well. So this isn't about buying a property because an estate agent has told us it's a good deal. It's not about buying a property because an estate agent has told us that it's ideal for property investors, or ideal for refurbishment, or, oh yeah, look at this, you can spend £100,000 refurbishing it and it's worth £300,000 more. You need to do all of your own research into that, because seldom is there that kind of margin straight away. You've actually got to look a little bit deeper and create that margin from the opportunity that you have. So appraising the project is super important at whatever project you're doing, but more important as your projects get bigger and get more complex. So these are not necessarily projects where we're seeing them in the morning and making an offer in the afternoon. We've got to go away and do some research and do some analysis, and actually ensure that we understand exactly what we are planning to purchase and exactly what we're planning to do with it. Now, the second element, and if you want more depth on that element and all the others, then go back to podcast number 3, because there is a lot more depth in there. And the second element is being totally clear what we need to deliver, and actually getting that down onto some drawings and some paperwork. So whilst with a smaller project, you might be able to walk around and say, well, replace the kitchen, put a new bathroom in there, paint all the walls out, test the electrics and put some carpet down. You might be able to get away with that kind of conversation with builders on smaller projects. On larger projects, there's far too many things to explain. So taking a builder into a larger project and saying, oh, just a loft conversion, rear extension, convert it into a 7-bedroom HMO, isn't gonna work. You need to be really, really specific. And a lot of this will actually start quite early on, because you may need to work with, say, an architect, perhaps to secure some planning permission for you. And subsequently put together some building regulation drawings to explain to builders how to build the actual project that you want to deliver. But remember, the architects are not specifying the fixtures and fittings. Builders predominantly are not property investors, so they're not aware of kind of what an HMO looks like, for instance, and how to manage an HMO, and what kind of fixtures and fittings are needed. Realistically, this goes back to part of that original appraisal. When you first appraise the building, what is that end tenant user? What does the end user look like? Where different users require different levels of fixtures and fittings. If we're working with, say, charities, we want fairly basic fixtures and fittings, much more function Places have to be safe and secure, of course, but we just want functions. If we're working at the high end, let's say serviced accommodation market, we may want integrated appliances in the kitchens, higher quality bathroom fittings, and perhaps better quality doors and ironmongery and things like that. Let's jumping in to make sure that you have everything you need. Now, in a number of these podcasts, you would have heard me talk about my community, and I want to ensure that you know how you can join that community. Obviously, within these podcasts, there's a limit to the detail I can go into the recording, and of course, a lot of things are very generic. So what if you had access to join me on a Zoom call for 90 minutes every single week in a group coaching environment? You could get your questions answered whenever they come up and learn from other members' questions. Plus, you also get 10 hours of training videos, an HMO refurbishment case study, some sample documents and checklists that will help you run your projects far more effectively. Membership of my community is just £89 a month. You get the first month free, and you can also cancel anytime after that. Plus, as a listener of this podcast, there's a promo code to help you save £20 every single month that you remain a member. So just make a note of VIP discount 20, VIP discount 20, all in capital letters, and put that into the checkout. You'll find the checkout on my website, www.refurbishmentmastery.com. Scroll down the page, you'll find the link for the Project Management Accelerator. Use the promo code VIP discount 20 and you'll be signed up at just £69 a month. I look forward to seeing you in that community very, very soon. Now back to the podcast. And it's really important that you take ownership of the specification of those elements, because ultimately it's you that is going to benefit from getting it right. And significantly, it's you that's going to feel the pain for getting it wrong. And therefore, if you want to get it right, you need to take control. So not only do we need some architect's drawings, we also need some kind of specification or schedule of work. A specification would specify all of the different fixtures and fittings. A schedule of works would take that information, but set it out in a way that actually builders can price elements of the work. It would also include the elements that are on the architect's drawings as well. And that that helps you. And I'm going to come to this in a little bit. It's going to help you get better information from your builders when you get to that stage. So just refreshing, the first element is we need to appraise our deal properly in the first place. We need to know what we're buying, we're paying the right price for it, what we're going to do with it, who's going to live in it. The next thing we need to do is we need to set out all of that information in some quality documents so that we all understand what we're trying to achieve. The third part is that we need to be focusing on selecting the right builder to deliver our project. And again, podcast 33, I talk about that in a lot more detail, and the importance of selecting the right builder. Now, on a small project, again, if you get the builder wrong, it could drive you mad for the next 10 weeks or so. But by and large, you will get out of it. If you have some kind of problem with a builder, you can probably sort it all out. Normally, you end up, if you've got the wrong builder, you normally end up having to spend a little bit more money somehow, somewhere to get the whole thing finished. But of course, on a bigger project, if you get the wrong builder, it's going to cost you more. If that goes wrong, the project is that much longer. So if you've got the wrong builder, you're working with the wrong builder that much longer, which will just drive you mad. So without any doubt, as projects get bigger, you need to do more and more due diligence into your builders to see that they are the right builder for your project. Are they a builder that can handle the size of project that you're working on at the moment? There's no point in having a builder who predominantly focuses on kitchen extensions and a refurbishment of of the ground floor of a house, something that might be 40 to 50,000 pounds. If you're looking at converting a bigger building into three apartments that could be 150 to 200,000 pounds, they may not have the resources, they may not have the skills, the knowledge of some of the things that go on there. So make sure you're selecting the right builder for your project. Make sure they've got the experience. Make sure they've got the funds behind them to fund your project. Make sure that they're engaged and come across as though they're capable of delivering the project and that they want to actually deliver the project. Take some references on them. If you're working on a smaller project and you don't take references on the builder, it's again, you might get the wrong builder, but we're talking about a few £1,000s and the problem sorts itself out normally. If you don't take references on the bigger builders, if you can't verify that they can deliver these projects successfully and also in a safe manner, because of course, the bigger the project, generally, the more health and safety concerns there are. There's more things we need to consider from a safety perspective. That's a little bit rule of general rule of thumb there. It's not always totally the case, but we do need to be sure that we're looking at the right builder from all angles. And of course, if we've given them a schedule of works and quality documents, quality drawings to price on, those better builders are immediately going to start to come forward. If you can't give builders quality documents, then that's when the builders that struggle to get work will start to come to the front. And you don't want to be working with those builders. The builders that do all sorts of deals to get you to sign on the dotted line and get started. You don't really want to be working with those builders. You want to be working with the quality builders that expect quality documentation, and given quality documentation, can actually deliver the right project for you. Remember that you're going to need larger builders for these larger projects, and bigger builders are generally smarter, and some of them, unfortunately, will prey on the weak. So the small builders that you're dealing with, you're probably dealing with the owner of the company, or perhaps they've got a project manager or someone, but it's a small business. You only ever see the same people all the time. As you start dealing with bigger builders, they've got multiple layers of management and layers of delivery of the project, and you will talk to a number of different people. And some of those people will, some of them, particularly if you're working on a big project, we say where the contractor employs quantity surveyors, that quantity surveyor's job is to make money for the building contracting business. And those quantity surveyors are pretty switched on and pretty smart and will know the angles. I say that because that was what I did for years and years and years. And I'd like to think I know most angles that are out there because I learned them. And that was how we made money for our companies. Now, that's not to say you're going to be ripped off by them, but they will be a lot more on the ball. And every little change that you come up with will cost you money. Whereas we're working with some of the smaller builders, you change your mind. A lot of them don't charge you anything for it. But the bigger builders, that is their mindset. Where you asked me to rebuild that little bit there, so it was quite a small job, but I did have to buy a little bit of timber, and we had to do this, and we had to get that in, and it did just delay that. So it has cost you £150. The general builder, the small builders, would probably have just written that off. The bigger builders you'll get these little prices for little changes that you want to do, because that is their mindset. That's how they're operating their business. The fourth element that we need to consider is how we are managing the project. Now, we need to consider that on any project we're doing, but of course, with a smaller project, there is generally a lot less risk. We need to start from the position is, do we have enough time to manage this project? If you're solely focusing on property investing, and you're just getting your business going, you almost certainly have got time. If you've got another business uh, alongside, you may not have time. You may have to spend all of your time running your other business. And by and large, that's why it's taken me a while to build my property portfolio, because I was always running another business, and property was something that, to a certain extent, we did on the side for quite a long time. So consider whether you've got the time. Have you got any skills and knowledge around how to deliver these bigger projects? You need to consider whether you are taking on more than you've got the skills and knowledge, and decide whether you are doing the right thing. Now, realistically, you may say, actually, I haven't got the time, the skills, or the knowledge, or any combination of those, in which case you're going to have to appoint a team. And then perhaps all you've got to do is just spend some time appointing the right team, and you can delegate this project out to that team to a greater or lesser extent, depending on what you want. I've mentioned architects already. You may need planning consultants, but going beyond those, if you're not very good at doing budgets, if you don't like negotiating numbers and figures with with contractors, then you may need to engage a quantity surveyor. You may have a larger project that needs a formal contract between you and the builder. We'd frequently use the JCT forms of contract, Joint Contract Tribunal, that stands for. We'd frequently use those contracts, and the quantity surveyor will put that together for you typically. You may actually engage a project manager. Quite often, project managers will cover the quantity surveying role as well, but they'll also be visiting your project on a regular basis to make sure that the builder is delivering the project correctly, particularly if your architect isn't engaged at that point. If you don't need the architect any longer, the project manager will be your expert. Now, you may be able to do some of this yourself. You may be able to, or you may need to outsource some of it. So, you kind of pick and choose what you want, and you need to weigh up the risk. And also, then go back to where I was at the start of this section: is you need to consider your own time, skills, and knowledge. What skills and knowledge have you got? Have you got sufficient to deliver this, or do you need to outsource some or all of the project to other people? When I was managing a project management business, I had some clients who never went to their projects. They would literally come to me as a project manager and say, deliver this project for me. Most of them would normally have an architect. They'd normally have got planning permission, but some of those clients never went to the project until it was totally finished. Other clients were there on a regular basis and got more involved. And depending on how much involvement they had and what they were doing would reflect back in my fee as a project manager. So consider what's right for you. Consider where the risk is in all of this. What are the elements that you're concerned about? Well, perhaps those are the elements that you need to outsource or take further advice on. And then, as far as taking further advice, in reality, this is my business. My business is all about providing confidence, encouragement, but also support for property investors and small developers that are managing their projects themselves. So, if you've got sufficient time, I can guide you and train you to become a project manager effectively. As long as you've got the time and you've got the project, I can do that for you. And I've been doing that now in one way or another since about 2000 and kind of 2013, really. So I've worked with lots of people in different ways. So don't overlook getting support from other people to deliver these bigger projects. Again, with a smaller project, you'll get away with it. And it might cost you a little bit if it goes wrong, but it will sort itself out. As your projects get bigger, your risk gets greater, the chances of things going wrong get greater, and significantly, the way that you've got to view these projects gets gets more important, really. Larger renovations really, they require more respect. They're not beyond you, but give them more respect. Be aware that you need to, be more engaged, and that, should we say, flying around by the seat of your pants is not going to get you through a bigger development successfully. There's you don't need to know absolutely everything about delivering a bigger development. There's lots of things I could talk about, and could go on for hours and hours of lots of different nuances. But in reality, get those four elements right, and get the right support, whether that's something you're outsourcing or something you're just going to get some basic training and mentoring on. Get that right support, and you can definitely deliver these bigger projects. As I say, you don't need to know everything, but you need to know where you can get this support from. And I would say, just as a kind of close off here, by and large, that support is not on Facebook. I see some ludicrous comments from people thinking that they know what they're talking about on Facebook. And sadly, the way most people think projects are delivered is not actually how it's delivered in the real world. There is quite a difference between the perception of the public and actually the way the experienced developers and investors are delivering projects. So be very careful of what you read on social media. Of course, have a look on YouTube. There's better content on YouTube. You'll find some of my content on YouTube as well. Of course, just look at Refurbishment Mastery, and you'll certainly find better information and knowledge in trade magazines. And there's other trainers, myself and other people out there training this kind of stuff. You'll find the consultants out there that will guide and support you. So I think the four real elements you need to focus on is more effort on making sure you're buying the right deal in the first place at the right price, making sure that you're totally clear about what needs to happen to the existing property to make it the property that you want to deliver at the end of the day, more effort on selecting the right builders and making sure that they are going to deliver exactly what you want. And then finally, considering how you deliver this from a management perspective. What's the limits on your time and skills, in your knowledge, and what other support do you need to be able to deliver these large projects? And absolutely, you can deliver larger projects for yourself, but just consider those four elements. So I wish you the best of the luck with your larger renovations. Keep in touch. I'm here to help you if you need me in any way at all.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. Please do like, share and leave a comment where you can. If you need any guidance or advice with anything to do with your refurbishments or conversions, then don't hesitate to reach out. You can book a free call with me by clicking on the link at the top of my website, refurbishmentmastery.com. There's other ways you can contact me in the show notes as well. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.